Chapter 9, Example 1A, we're going to do the calculations and the journal entries for the employer payroll taxes. So in Chapter 8, we looked at the employee payroll taxes, and now we're going to look at the employer. So hopefully through the reading, you've determined that the employer also has to pay taxes in equal amounts of Social Security and Medicare. So the IRS ends up getting double of what we have calculated so far. So in your textbook for chapters 9-1A, we have Barney's Bagels payroll register, and it tells us that the total earnings for Barney's Bagels is $12,200. The total taxable earnings for unemployment compensation is $10,500, and the total taxable earnings of Social Security is $12,200. So what that's telling us is it's just giving us the balances of all employees. So we could have 5 employees or 10 employees, but however many we have, their total earnings were $12,200. Of that $12,200, only $10,500 are subject to unemployment compensation, and the reason that is less is because we learned through this chapter also that there's a maximum for unemployment compensation. The employer only has to pay unemployment compensation on the first $7,000 of each individual employees' earnings. So that total represents 5 or 10 employees possibly. Then our Social Security is $12,200. So the fact that that amount is the same as our total earnings tells us that none of our employees have reached the Social Security maximum. So all of their wages are subject to Social Security. So we're not so concerned with the individual amounts of the employees because we're just going to calculate the employer portion. So the employer is going to pay Social Security tax also at a rate of 6.2%. Medicare is still at a rate of 1.45%. Then we have FUTA and SUTA. FUTA is our federal unemployment tax and SUTA is our state unemployment tax. So the SUTA rate that our textbook uses is 0.6%, which is 0.006, and SUTA is 5.4%, which ends up being 0.054. So we're going to use the appropriate numbers from the textbook. It says that all of our taxable earnings subject to Social Security is $12,200. So if we take that times 0.062, we get the $756.40. Medicare tax is always on total earnings. Our total earnings amount is $12,200 times 1.45% is $176.90. And then our 2 unemployment taxes, federal and state, though, we only have, of that $12,200, only $10,500 of it is actually subject to the unemployment taxes. So that's why we have $10,500 times 0.06 and $10,500 times 0.054. So that gives us the amounts to be withheld, and then we get our total employer payroll taxes of $1,563. So keep in mind, we're not dealing with employees. You're not going to use a cash account right now. We're simply going to take all the taxes that the employer has to pay and put them in a temporary liability account, and then we're going to debit our payroll tax expense for that amount. This expense arises from payroll taxes, not from wages and salaries. So in Chapter 8, we debited wages and salaries, and in this chapter, we're going to debit payroll tax expense for this total of $1,563.30. And then so our Social Security tax payable matches this amount, Medicare tax payable, FUTA tax payable, and SUTA tax payable. And it is important that you put the word payable at the end of this to denote that we understand these are liability accounts and will be paid to the appropriate federal agency at the end of every quarter.